talk about the beautiful business of milk today. Yeah, yeah. I got milk. Let's talk about milk. Oh yeah, baby, let's talk about the beautiful business of milk today.
This episode of Got Milk is sponsored by Shunya Agritech, the folks revolutionizing cattle nutrition with hydroponic green fodder. Visit their website at shunya.live for more details or download the Shunya app from Play Store or App Store.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going deep on something that might make you think twice about your morning latte.
Oh, intriguing.
Yeah, the Indian dairy industry.
Yeah.
And you want to understand all the complexities, right? Not just the simple version of the story.
Exactly.
You sent over some academic research on this, and let me tell you, it's pretty intense.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't light reading.
No, not at all. But that's what we do here, right? We break it all down.
Right, make it digestible.
Totally. So, India, it's the world's biggest milk producer, a real powerhouse.
Yeah, the sheer scale of it is mind-boggling.
It is. But there are these complex challenges behind that success. It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah, a real paradox. I mean, since the 1950s, their milk production has quadrupled.
Quadrupled.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. How do they achieve that? What's the secret?
Well, a big part of it is dairy cooperatives.
Cooperatives.
Yeah. Millions of farmers, many of them smallholders, working together, pooling resources.
So it's not just like these huge industrial farms.
No, not at all. In fact, on average, 22.5% of a rural Indian family's income comes from milk.
Wow, that's significant.
It is. It's a lifeline for a lot of families.
Makes sense. But, we know there are some roadblocks to the success. Like this research paper mentioned climate change.
Uh-huh.
How does that factor in?
Well, you got to think about India's monsoon season.
Right, the rains.
Exactly. It brings most of the country's rainfall. And that's crucial not just for the cows, but for the fodder they eat.
Right.
Yeah.
No rain, no grass.
Exactly. And the paper highlights a big drop in milk collection during the lean season. When rainfall is scarce compared to the flush season.
Like how big of a drop are we talking?
About 16%.
16%,
Yeah.
wow.
And imagine the ripple effect that has.
Right, on the entire supply chain.
Yeah. And then there are the logistical issues.
Right. Getting the milk from farms to the processing plants.
Exactly. That's a huge challenge, especially in a country as vast and diverse as India.
Yeah, you don't want that milk spoiling.
Exactly. You need a really robust system to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay, so climate, logistics. What about the price squeeze that farmers face? I mean, I hear about that a lot.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one. The cost of production is a major issue. Farmers are getting hit from both sides.
How so?
Well, we've got rising input costs, right?
Yeah.
And then relatively low milk prices.
So they're not being paid fairly for their hard work.
Well, it's a complicated equation. There are middlemen, processing costs, transportation. It all adds up. And the farmers often end up with a pretty small piece of the pie.
Right. It's multi-layered. Everyone's feeling the pressure.
Uh-huh. And then you've got this whole other thing happening with Tetra packaging and marketing wars, the paper calls it.
Tetra packaging, like the cartons you see in the supermarket.
Exactly. It's been revolutionary, but it's also created this whole new battleground.
Oh, wow. So it's like a brand name milk showdown.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And smaller dairies struggle to compete with the big brands. They just don't have the same resources for marketing and packaging.
The little guys get squeezed out. I see.
Yeah, unfortunately. And then you have to factor in the socioeconomic piece of all this.
The socioeconomic.
Yeah. The paper highlights how issues like unemployment and poverty in rural areas are linked to the dairy industry's problems.
It's all connected.
Exactly. It's not just about milk. It's about people's lives.
Absolutely. It's about livelihoods and futures.
Yeah. When farmers struggle financially, it's hard to invest in better practices.
Right. So lower milk yield.
Lower quality. And that just perpetuates the cycle.
Man, this is heavy stuff.
It is.
But the paper also talks about solutions, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But before we get to those, we have to address one more big thing. Political interference.
Oh, yeah. Right. I almost forgot about that.
Yeah. It's a recurring issue in a lot of sectors, and dairy's no exception.
It can really create an uneven playing field,
It can, favoring certain producers over others.
like trying to build something stable on shifting sand.
Exactly. And then on top of that, there's the technology gap. Many Indian farms, especially smaller ones, they just don't have access to modern technology.
You mean like artificial insemination, veterinary care, all that?
Yep. And without those tools, it's hard to keep up.
Okay. Wow. This is a lot to take in. I can see why you said this paper was intense.
It is. But there are solutions out there, and we can talk about those. We can talk about those, yeah.
Let's do it. Give me some hope here.
Okay, so the research paper, it offers a multi-pronged approach, right?
Okay.
One key area is breed improvement.
Breed improvement.
Yeah, using science basically to create cows and buffaloes that are better suited to local conditions.
So it's not just importing, fancy foreign cows.
Right.
It's about finding the right mix,
Yeah.
For India's climate.
Exactly. So for example, you could crossbreed the high-yielding Holstein Friesians
Holstein, yeah.
with indigenous breeds like the Sahiwal or the Gyr, cows that are known for their heat tolerance, disease resistance.
Right, they're adapted to the environment.
Exactly. And then when it comes to buffaloes, the Murrah buffalo, that one's highly prized for its milk production.
Right, right. It's fascinating how science can help tailor breeds, for specific environments.
Yeah.
Speaking of science and solutions, the paper also talked about better fodder cultivation.
Mm-hmm.
What's the thinking there?
Well, fodder quality is super important for milk production
Of course.
and for overall animal health. Imagine if, instead of relying just on, seasonal rainfall, farmers had access to year-round sources of high-quality fodder.
Yeah, that would make a huge difference.
It would. It creates a more stable, sustainable food supply for the animals.
Right, right. So it's not just about the animals themselves, but it ties into land management and sustainability as a whole.
Exactly. By cultivating the right kind of fodder, you're boosting milk yields, you're improving soil health, you're reducing reliance on water-intensive crops.
Right. It's win-win.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got breed improvement, better fodder. What about the logistical nightmares we were talking about? Any solutions there?
Yeah, definitely. The paper suggests investing in better transportation networks,
Okay.
creating more efficient milk society, and establishing fair pricing structures that actually benefit the farmers.
Right, so kind of like an overhaul of the whole system is needed.
Yeah, in a way. But technology can play a big role too,
Yeah, how so?
Imagine small-scale farmers having access to mobile apps.
Mobile apps.
Yeah, that give them, real-time information on milk prices,
Oh, interesting.
weather forecasts, even veterinary advice.
Wow. So it's like putting a digital toolbox in their hands.
Exactly.
I love that. What about the more modern technologies that we were talking about earlier?
Oh, yeah, like milk chilling units, for example.
Milk chilling.
Yeah, these smaller, more affordable units, they can be a real game changer for small farms, especially in areas without reliable electricity.
So they can preserve the quality of their milk even without constant power.
Exactly.
That's huge.
It is. But, it's only part of the puzzle, right?
Right.
You give farmers the tools, but they need to know how to use them.
Right. They need the knowledge.
Yeah. The paper emphasizes training, education programs.
Right. So empower them.
Exactly.
Not just a handout, but equip them to thrive in the industry.
Right.
It seems like consumer choices play a role in all this too, right?
Huge role.
I mean, what can we as consumers do?
Well, supporting brands that prioritize, fair trade practices, animal welfare, sustainable production.
Okay, so look for those labels, the certifications.
Exactly. But it's more than just checking boxes,
Yeah.
Stay curious, ask questions, learn about the practices behind the products you're buying.
Right, do your research.
Yeah, support your local farmers markets,
Yeah.
Connect with the people who are actually growing and producing your food.
That's a great point. It's about being an informed and conscious consumer.
Exactly. And remember, your choices have ripple effects. When you demand better, the industry responds.
I love that. It's empowering to know that we're not, powerless in all this.
Yeah, it's a collective effort.
When we started this deep dive, I had no idea how complex the Indian dairy industry really is.
It is, and it's a kind of a microcosm of the global food system as a whole.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, the challenges that Indian dairy farmers face, they're mirrored in a lot of other parts of the world.
It's a good reminder that, the choices we make, whether we're farmers or policymakers or just consumers, they have big consequences.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also hope. We've seen that there are solutions, these innovative approaches that combine science, technology, and an understanding of the social and economic side of things.
Absolutely. And it's really inspiring to see people working hard to create a more sustainable and equitable industry.
Yeah.
One that benefits both people and animals.
So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway message for our listeners?
Well, what I find so interesting is how the Indian dairy industry, while, unique in many ways, it also it reflects these global challenges facing food production.
Right.
It's a story about navigating climate change, embracing innovation, ensuring that there's social and economic equity.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance between producing enough food, but also, protecting the planet and the people who are involved in the process.
Exactly. And it's not just about governments and policymakers, it's about all of us. Each of us has a role to play.
That brings me to my next question.
Yeah.
What can listeners do to contribute to a more sustainable and ethical dairy industry? Both in India and beyond. I mean, most of us aren't farmers or policymakers.
Right, but consumer choices, they really matter, Supporting brands that are prioritizing sustainability, ethical sourcing, that's a huge way to make your voice heard.
So that means looking for those certifications, the labels.
Exactly. But it's more than just like ticking boxes.
Right.
Stay curious, ask questions, learn about the practices behind the products you buy, support local farmers markets, connect with the people who are actually growing and producing your food.
It's about being an informed and conscious consumer.
Precisely. And remember, your choices, they have ripple effects. When you demand better, the industry responds. It's a collective effort.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I had no idea how much went into that glass of milk.
It is. It really makes you think.
It does.
Yeah.
So what's the one thing we want our listeners to walk away with today?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we all have a part to play in creating a more sustainable and ethical food system. It's not just about the choices we make at the grocery store. It's about the conversations we have, the questions we ask, and the actions we take to support a better future for everyone, farmers, consumers, and the planet itself.
I love that. That's a powerful message.
It is.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
A huge thanks to you for joining us and sharing your expertise. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on the Indian dairy industry and the global food system as a whole.
It's a complex issue for sure.
It is, but it's an issue that deserves our attention. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep making those conscious choices. It's amazing, we've covered so much, but it still feels like we've just scratched the surface of this whole thing.
It's a really complex issue, yeah.
It is. It really changes how I think about my morning latte.
That's the point, right? To make us think about where our food comes from.
Absolutely. So what's the big takeaway here for our listeners? What do we want them to walk away with?
I think the Indian dairy industry is a fascinating example, because it's unique in a lot of ways, but it also kind of reflects these global challenges facing food production.
Right, yeah.
It's a story about climate change, innovation, making sure there's social and economic equity.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance.
Exactly. And it's not just governments, it's all of us.
Right. That brings me to my next question. What can listeners do? To actually contribute to a more sustainable and ethical dairy industry. I mean, most of us aren't farmers or policymakers.
No, but consumer choices really do matter.
Yeah.
Supporting brands that are really focusing on sustainability, ethical sourcing, that's a big way to make a difference.
So looking for those certifications, those labels like fair trade, organic.
Yeah, but it's more than just ticking boxes,
Okay, yeah.
It's about staying curious, asking questions, learning about where your food comes from.
Yeah, like really digging in, doing the research.
Exactly. It's supporting your local farmers markets.
Yeah.
making that connection with the people who are actually producing your food.
Right. It's about being an informed consumer.
Exactly. And remember, those choices, they have ripple effects. When consumers demand better, the industry has to respond.
It's a collective effort.
It is.
I love that. Well, this has been a really incredible deep dive. I can't believe how much I've learned about the Indian dairy industry.
Me too. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is. So what's the one thing we want our listeners to walk away with today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we all have a part to play in creating a more sustainable and ethical food system. It's not just about the choices we make at the grocery store. It's the conversations we have, the questions we ask, and the actions we take to support a better future, for everyone, farmers, consumers, and the planet itself.
I love that. That's a great way to wrap things up.
Thanks.
A huge thanks to you for joining us today and sharing your insights.
My pleasure. I always enjoy these conversations.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on the Indian dairy industry and the global food system as a whole. It's a complex issue, but it's one that deserves our attention. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep making those conscious choices.
I got milk.